Imagine waking up in the middle of the night. You're inside a thin fabric tent. Outside, a violent snowstorm is roaring across a frozen mountain. The temperature is nearly -30 degrees. Your friends are sleeping around you. Everything is quiet until suddenly something happens. Something so terrifying that you grab a knife and slice your tent open. From the inside, you don't put on your boots. You don't grab your jacket. You don't even think. You just run, barefoot, into the freezing darkness. It sounds like something from a horror movie. But in 1959, this exact nightmare happened to a group of hikers in the Russian mountains. And what investigators discovered afterward still makes absolutely no sense. This is the chilling mystery of the Dyatlov Pass Incident. In January of 1959, 9 young hikers prepared for a difficult winter expedition. They were students and athletes from the Ural Polytechnic Institute. This wasn't a group of beginners. Every member of the team was highly trained in winter survival. They had climbed dangerous mountains before. They knew how to survive extreme cold. The group leader was a 23-year-old engineering student named Igor Dyatlov. He was respected, calm, and experienced. The hikers documented their journey with cameras and journals. In the photos taken during the trip, you can see them smiling, laughing, playing in the snow. At that moment, none of them had any idea that their adventure would soon become one of the most disturbing mysteries in history. Their destination was a remote mountain deep in the Ural range. But the mountain had a strange name. Locals called it Kolatsiakal, which translates to something unsettling. Dead Mountain. For days, the group traveled deeper into the wilderness. The weather slowly became worse. The wind grew stronger. The snowstorms became more aggressive. Eventually, the hikers reached the slope of the mountain. It was February 1st, 1959. Instead of descending into the forest where the wind was weaker, the group made a strange decision. They set up their tent directly on the exposed mountainside. The location left them vulnerable to brutal winds, but they were confident in their skills. They dug into the snow, built a camp, and settled inside their tent for the night. Outside, the storm grew stronger. The mountains became silent, except for the wind. At some point during the night, something went horribly wrong. Weeks later, rescue teams finally discovered the abandoned campsite, and what they saw immediately raised disturbing questions. The tent was still standing, but it had been cut open from the inside, not torn, not damaged by animals, cut from inside the tent, as if the hikers were trying to escape as quickly as possible. Even stranger, their footprints were still visible in the snow. Investigators followed them, and what they saw was unbelievable. The footprints showed the hikers walking away from the tent, barefoot. Some were wearing only socks. Some had no shoes at all. And they were heading straight toward the dark forest below the mountain. Remember, this was happening in temperatures cold enough to freeze a person to death within minutes. So the question investigators asked was simple. What could possibly scare 9 experienced hikers so badly that they would run half-naked into a deadly blizzard? Search teams began scanning the surrounding forest. Soon, they made the first horrifying discovery. 2 bodies were found beneath a large pine tree. The men had tried to start a small fire. Broken branches above them suggested they had climbed the tree, possibly trying to see something in the distance. But they were barely dressed. Both had frozen to death. Not far from them, search teams found 3 more bodies, including their leader, Igor Dyatlov. They were lying in the snow, facing the direction of the tent. It looked like they had tried to crawl back to safety, but the cold had killed them before they could make it. At this point, investigators believe they understood the tragedy. Maybe the hikers had panicked during a snow avalanche. Maybe they ran from their tent in fear. But when the remaining bodies were discovered, the mystery became far more disturbing. Months later, after the snow began to melt, 4 more bodies were discovered inside a deep ravine, and their injuries shocked investigators. One victim had a crushed skull. Another had massive chest fractures. One woman was missing her tongue. Yet strangely, there were almost no external wounds. Doctors said the injuries looked similar to what happens in a powerful car crash. But there was no crash, no struggle, no sign of attackers, as if some invisible force had applied an enormous pressure to their bodies. Even stranger, some of their clothing showed high levels of radiation. To this day, no one knows how that happened. Over the decades, many explanations have been proposed. Some scientists believe an avalanche forced the hikers to flee. Others suggest secret Soviet military experiments nearby. Some witnesses even reported strange glowing lights in the sky that night. But none of these theories explain every piece of evidence. The torn tent, the footprints, the severe injuries, the missing tongue, the radiation. Each answer creates more questions, and the mystery only grows deeper. Today, the mountain pass where the hikers died has been renamed in memory of their leader. The place is now known as the Dyatlov Pass Incident. The winds still howl across the frozen slopes, and the mountains remain silent. But one question still lingers in the darkness. What happened that night inside that tent? What could scare 9 experienced hikers so badly that they chose the frozen wilderness instead of whatever was waiting outside? And if you had been there that night, would you have stayed inside the tent or run into the darkness?